Hi, it's Daniel Priyo here, and this game was played between Magnus Carlsen and Liren during the Magnus Carlsen Chess Tour finals. In particular, this game featured the London system, so if you are a London player or if you'd like to start playing the London system, then you definitely want to see how Magnus Carlsen treats his position and how Liren defends with the black pieces as well. This game is extremely important because it features some very fresh ideas. And if you are playing the London system at any level, you might want to incorporate these ideas in your own play as well. So Magnus Carlsen with the white pieces starting the game with the move 1 d4. After knight f6, knight f3, d5, Magnus Carlsen's intentions are clear. Bishop f4, the London system is on the board. So Liren decides to defend with c5, and after e3, playing e6, pretty standard so far. c3 played by Magnus Carlsen, and here bishop d6. Generally, the main move after bishop d6 is to retreat to g3. The reason is, if white just captures the bishop on d6, the queen can capture, and it's possible, it's perfectly playable, but in a way, it could probably just help black, because right now, black has got a bishop out, white has got a bishop out. After the exchange, black would have the queen out, and white would still not have its queen developed. So there's no reason really to help black's development by capturing the bishop. So the main move in this position is actually to retreat to g3. The other moves are possible as well. So for example, it's possible to go knight e5, it's possible to capture in c5, so there's a few different ideas. But by far, the main move is bishop g3. What Magnus Carlsen did is something that is also relatively popular, but not as popular, and it's simply ignoring the threat, the positional threat of doubling the pawns on f4 and developing the knight. So black could capture here, and in this game, black decided not to capture for a specific reason, but rather do something a little bit different. Now, if black captures, white has to recapture with the pawn. And you may be thinking, let's just put this on the board, after bishop takes, pawn takes, you may be thinking that white's pawn structure is ruined, but in reality, this e5 square can become extremely strong for white. So now there's two pawns supporting the square. It's not so easy for black to really get to attack this pawn. For example, if something like queen c7, try and attack, the knight on e5 is shielding. So there's really nothing that black can do to immediately exploit this slight structural weakness that white has decided to take. And at the same time, it's not so easy for black to deal with this knight on e5. Also note that despite two pawns being on the fourth rank, controlling the square e5, there's another pawn now on f2, which could potentially be pushed to f3. So in some Stonewall lines, when white has got pawns on d4 and f4, the pawn is usually over here on e3, and that means that the e4 square becomes very weak. But with this structure, this pawn can go to f3, so knight e4 is not as threatening, and therefore white is happy in that situation. Of course, again, this is not the main line, this is considered a side line, because it is still a slight structural weakness, and maybe in an ending, if black managed to get to the ending, maybe black gets some chances to play against it. But overall, white is playing in a very principled way, exploiting this weakness on e5 created after the move d5. So this didn't happen because of this particular reason. It didn't happen in this game, but it's possible. Here, Ding decided to get clever and thinking, okay, so I'm gonna capture on d4 now. Now this is interesting. In this position, Ding captured on d4, and after now imagine in general white wants to recapture with the e pawn, because that's the type of Carlsbad reversed that you normally want when you play the London system. But right now it's impossible to capture with the e pawn, and if white captures with the knight, which would have been possible had black postponed the capture in c5. Right now, this obviously doesn't work because of e5, that's a fork. Note that this knight is not yet on c6, so knight c6 is not possible. If this knight was on c6, knight c6 would save the piece here. So here it looks like the only option for white is to capture c takes d4. And now, first of all, this is a Slav exchange structure where white doesn't get the type of cards but that normally wants, but more importantly, black can immediately capture the bishop now, and now it's different, because now this pawn is isolated. If we go back for a moment and imagine if black is taken immediately after this, if black captures now, knight takes is possible, so there's no isolated pawn. The other knight is going to e5, and white has got very beautiful knights. But by doing this, by playing this particular move order, c takes d4 before capturing on f4, black is trying to force some concession, namely c d4 and then bishop takes, pawn takes, creating not only a double pawn on f4 but an isolated pawn on d4. But white had something different in mind, and this game is already showing a pretty novel idea. Now white is capturing the bishop, and the reason why he's doing that is, first of all, if black just recaptures, white can just take on d4 with the e-pawn because it's no longer a bishop hanging on f4. So black, to justify this play, really wanted to play the in-between move, thinking, hey, wait a minute, I'm winning a pawn. If I don't recapture your bishop immediately, I take another pawn, and now I'm threatening your knight with check. If you don't capture this pawn, then you lose your knight with check. And white said, that's fine, I'm gonna keep my bishop. Please have my knight. And after recapturing the pawn, white has effectively sacrificed the pawn right now. But at the same time, white has got a monster bishop. It's impossible for black to castle short. So white has got not just a bishop here, but also an unopposed dark square bishop, which is making it so hard for black to castle. So that was a very creative idea by Magnus Carlsen, and the game continued with knight c6, queen e3, after knight c6, the move was queen g5. My bad, it was queen g5. So after knight c6, it was queen g5. Now, the idea of queen g5 was obviously to put pressure on g7. And now black cannot castle, black can't even play king to f8. So here, it's not so easy to avoid moving the rook to g8. So for example, if g6, all of a sudden, this can be a serious weakness on the king side. Remember, black does not have a dark square bishop, and white does. So putting a pawn on a light square might be pretty dangerous strategically. So black decides, hey, you know what, I'm not going to castle there anyway. I'm just going to play rook g8, and later on I'll make space on the other side of the board, and I will castle. So bishop d3 was played, h6 just to kick the queen away. After queen b6, offering exchange of queens, simply queen e2, white, being down a pawn, does not want to play without queens. Bishop d7 and short castle, long castle, and all of a sudden we can see here that white is looking to attack the black king. So here in this position we have opposite wing castles. What that means is that the game is gonna take kind of a sharp nature. Whoever gets there first, whoever gets to the enemy king first, will probably have a big advantage. And in this particular type of game, the material consideration, in particular being up a pawn, is not so relevant, because here we're talking about checkmating each other's king, which is not what you normally do when you are castle on the same side. If you castle on the same side, usually only one side is attacking the king, if any. But when the kings are castled on opposite sides, usually it's both sides attacking the enemy king. So here b4, this bishop looks a little bit silly for one move, but the pawn, of course, is going to continue its journey towards b5, harassing this knight. King b8, just to bring the king to a safer file. In b5 comes knight a5, and now white jumps into, once again, the e5 square is a key square for the London system players. e5, bishop goes back, defending f7, and bishop b4. So you can see how white's position is really a lot more harmonious. There's a much better coordination between the white pieces and the black pieces. This knight here on a5 is a little bit stranded. These rooks are not connected. This bishop on the first rank is not very active. This queen is not especially active. Conversely, white's pieces are all extremely very active, and the rooks are coming into the game pretty quickly. So rook c8 was played, pressurizing this this pawn. Now, if black doesn't do anything immediately, what white wants to do is simply continue pushing the pawns, improving the rooks first, and simply going at this king. And meanwhile, this attack is really very slow, so very low chances to succeed for black. a4 was played, and here Dean Liren decides to do something a little bit creative, a little bit drastic. But the reason is, if black doesn't do anything and simply waits, black is probably going to have a defend a very difficult position. Say queen c7, for example, move like c4 is coming, opening up lines against the black king, and it's going to be very hard for black to defend. Still, it was better to defend passively. What Ding did was to play knight e4, and here there is an idea, but unfortunately it looks like Magnus Carlsen has calculated this one move deeper. The idea is to say, hey, this knight on e5 is just so annoying, I want to get rid of it, so I want to play f6. Now, in order to play f6, I need to vacate this square first, so let me play knight e4. My knight is very active, and I'm giving up a pawn, true, but remember, black is already up a pawn. So the idea for black would be, if I give up a knight for this bishop, so I give up a pawn overall, because the queen can capture back, but now we have a position it's easier to defend. If I can play f6, this knight is to go back, then we're going to have opposite color bishops, which also increases drawing chances. So overall, black figured out that this would be an active way to defend, but unfortunately it doesn't quite work out tactically, because after takes, now black played f6, which was the whole point, but here there is this move queen h7. And I don't know if Ding Liren missed queen h7 or maybe miscalculated or misevaluated queen h7, because now, true, the knight is attacked, but the rook is also attacked, and it's really not so easy to solve this problem. If black simply moves the bishop, so for example, let's say, of course, black needs to keep the protection of this square, because otherwise the knight would jump here with a royal fork. So let's say bishop c6. Now it looks like you can't put the bishop there because it's on pre, but also this knight is on pre as well. So there is this possibility, bishop c6. But you know what? This is not forced, but white can simply capture here. And if black recaptures the piece, what else? Then all of a sudden, white has got a file in front of the king. cb7 might happen immediately, or it can be prepared with rook ab1 or even rook fb1. This is just crushing for white. So this is not going to work out for black. And the bishop, of course, cannot go anywhere else without allowing a check on d7. And if black just takes the knight, white is simply going to go rook takes g8. A queen takes rook on g8. And now white is up the exchange. And if black tries something forcing to justify the fact that it's down material, for example, something like knight b3, the rook could potentially move somewhere else, but then a move like bishop b5 is coming in. This is not so clear. It's still winning for white, but it's not so clear all of a sudden. The queen is attacked and the rook here is attacked. But here, white has the beautiful in-between move a5. And now this is different, because now if the queen leaves this rank, this queen can always take this pawn with check. Right now, even the knight would be hanging. But more importantly, the queen would just be able to escape any discovery from the bishop. So this position is completely lost for black. And here, if black tries this immediately, the queen can simply capture on g7, and after bishop takes, there is this in-between check, which completely ends the game, because now this knight is going to fall with tempo, so bishop takes knight. And here, black can try to play on with queen c5, but after takes, white doesn't need to recapture the bishop just yet. One more in-between move, bishop b4, the rook is attacked, the bishop is attacked, black cannot save the material, and this is game over. So Ding Liren must have missed something along these lines. It's not clear which line exactly he missed, but definitely Magnus Carlsen outcalculated Ding Liren in this position. Therefore, f takes was impossible here, so Ding Liren tried knight b3, but here queen g8 happens anyway, and after the knight takes on a8, the beautiful move to end the game, not the old move, but certainly very visual, queen takes bishop on e8, and here Ding Liren resigned. The reason is, next knight d7 is coming, forking a king and a queen, this knight is still hanging, and therefore white is up a lot of material, and this is a game over. So a beautiful game played by Magnus Carlsen. Just go back for a moment to the original position. After a few standard moves here, knight bd2 is played, inviting black to capture on d4, which looks very good structurally, but hey, here comes the sacrifice. All of a sudden, black is up a pawn, but white has got a monster bishop, and white later on went on to convert that into a full victory. So I hope you enjoyed this game. If you played the London system, definitely you want to study this particular game and several other games that we analyze as well. So make sure you subscribe to this channel, because we do have a lot of games analyzed, played by top grandmasters, Magnus Carlsen, Levon Aronian, Fabiano Caruana, just to name a few. And as you can see, there's really some very fresh ideas that we analyze as well, because if you play in London, you really want to be on top of the novelties, but more importantly, you really want to understand the strategic concepts and patterns in this opening. So it's really important to stay up to date for that reason as well. So make sure you subscribe to this channel. And also, I would love to know what you think about the sacrifice, because after all, you know, a pawn is a pawn. So it's true that you have a strong bishop, but black has got a pawn. If black manages to consolidate somehow, then you know, white will have to justify the material deficit. So let me know what you think about this idea with the sacrifice. Let me know if it's something that you would play in your own games, or maybe you prefer to stick to more solid lines with bishop g3, as we have seen as well. Thank you so much for watching this video. This is Daniel Priya. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next video.